The prison cafeteria fell silent the moment the new inmate walked in. She was pale, quiet, and didn't look like she belonged there. That's all it took. From the back table, a group of women started whispering, then laughing. One of them, the leader, stood up, sauntered over, and slammed her tray right on the newcomer's food. "Welcome to my table, sweetheart," she sneered. Then she tipped the tray, stew and milk spilling across the woman's lap. The room erupted in laughter, but the new inmate didn't move. She just looked up, calm, steady, and wiped the mess off her uniform. Her eyes didn't show fear. They showed control. "Don't touch me again," she said softly. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. The bully laughed, stepped closer, and in a single blur of motion, the newcomer's hand shot up, twisting the woman's wrist and dropping her to her knees before anyone even saw what happened. Silence. Even the guards froze. No one knew it yet, but the woman they'd just humiliated wasn't some fragile newcomer. She was a martial arts master, one the system should have never locked behind bars. Stay with me until the end, because what happened next made even the warden question who was really in control. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The steel doors of Greenfield Women's Correctional Facility slammed shut with a finality that echoed through every corridor like a death knell. It was a sound that broke most women before they even saw their first cell. But when 36-year-old Elena Martinez heard those doors close behind her, her expression remained unchanged. Her hands stayed steady at her sides, her posture straight despite the orange jumpsuit that hung loose on her slender frame. The intake officer barely glanced up from her paperwork as she processed the new arrival. Another middle-class woman caught up in the system. Probably embezzlement or tax fraud. Something white-collar that finally caught up with her. Nothing threatening. Nothing that would cause problems on the block. Just another number to fill another bunk. But if that officer had looked closer, really looked, she might have noticed something different about Elena Martinez. The way she moved with purpose even in shackles. The way her eyes catalogued every detail of her surroundings without seeming to stare. The way her breathing remained controlled and measured despite being in one of the most dangerous women's prisons in the state. Elena had been a free woman for 36 years. She had owned and operated 3 martial arts studios, trained everyone from scared single mothers to elite military personnel. She had lived a disciplined life built on respect, precision, and the ancient teachings passed down from her Japanese master 2 decades ago. Now she was prisoner number 84672, and the next 7 years of her life would be spent behind these concrete walls. The cell block Elena was assigned to was controlled by one woman, and everyone knew it. Roxanne Roxy Blake was 5'11" of pure intimidation. Her scarred arms told the story of 16 years behind bars. Her crew of loyal followers moved through the prison like they owned every inch of it. And in many ways, they did. Roxy had built her empire on fear and calculated violence. She decided who ate and who went hungry. She determined which inmates got protection and which ones became targets. The guards looked the other way because Roxy kept order in her own brutal fashion, and that made their jobs significantly easier. When word spread that a new fish was coming to the block, Roxy's interest was immediately piqued. Fresh meat meant fresh opportunities to remind everyone exactly who ran things in cell block D. The first time Roxy laid eyes on Elena, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. A small Latina woman, probably no more than 5'4", moving carefully like every step might be her last. This wasn't just easy prey. This was a gift wrapped in orange fabric. Elena's first night was quiet. She made her bunk with military precision, organized her few belongings in perfect rows, and sat reading a worn paperback book until lights out. She didn't speak to her cellmate, a nervous young woman named Ashley, who had been counting down the days until her own release. "You seem different," Ashley whispered after the lights went dark. "Most new girls, they're either scared out of their minds or trying to act tough. You're just calm." Elena closed her book and set it aside. "Panic clouds judgment," she said softly. "Clarity comes from stillness." Ashley didn't understand what that meant, but something in the older woman's voice made her feel safer than she had in months. The next morning brought Elena's first trip to the cafeteria, and Roxy was waiting. She had positioned herself and her crew near the entrance, making sure every inmate would have to walk past them. It was a power move, a reminder of the hierarchy that existed in this place. Elena entered the cafeteria, carrying herself with the same quiet dignity she had maintained since her arrival. She moved to get her tray, her eyes scanning the room, not with fear, but with the practiced awareness of someone who had spent decades teaching others how to defend themselves. The food was exactly what she expected. Watery scrambled eggs, burnt toast, coffee that looked like it had been sitting since yesterday. She took what was offered without complaint and began looking for a place to sit. That's when Roxy made her move. Well, Roxy's voice boomed across the cafeteria, causing conversations to stop and heads to turn. Look what we got here, ladies. Somebody's suburban housewife got herself locked up. Elena continued walking, her tray steady in her hands, her expression unchanged. She had dealt with bullies before, though not quite in this setting. The principle remained the same: show no fear, but avoid unnecessary confrontation. Roxy stepped directly into Elena's path, her imposing frame blocking the way to the tables. Her crew flanked her on both sides, grins spreading across their faces as they anticipated the show. "I'm talking to you, Chico," Roxy said, her voice dropping to a menacing growl. "When somebody speaks to you in here, you answer. That's how respect works." Elena stopped walking and looked up at Roxy calmly. "I heard you," she said simply. "I just don't have anything to say." The response caught Roxy off guard. Most new inmates either cowered in fear or tried to act tough. This Latina woman was doing neither. She was just standing there, completely unimpressed by the display of intimidation. "You don't have anything to say," Roxy repeated, her voice getting louder. "Maybe you don't understand how things work around here. See, I run this block. That means everything that happens here goes through me, including where some little housewife like you gets to sit." Elena remained perfectly still, her breathing slow and controlled. Years of meditation and training had taught her to find calm in the center of any storm. This was just another storm. "I understand," Elena said quietly. "You're the person in charge. I'm just trying to eat my breakfast." Roxy's face flushed with anger. The Latina woman's calm was making her look weak in front of her crew, in front of the entire cafeteria. That couldn't stand. Without warning, Roxy reached out and grabbed Elena's tray, slamming it down on top of Elena's food. Then she tipped it, sending stew and milk cascading across Elena's lap. The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Elena looked down at the mess covering her orange jumpsuit, then back up at Roxy. Her expression hadn't changed. No anger, no fear, just that same measuring calm. "Don't touch me again," Elena said softly. The words were barely audible over the laughter, but something in her tone made several inmates near the front stop laughing. Roxy leaned in close, her breath hot on Elena's face. "Or what, Chiku? What you gonna do about it?" Elena set down what remained of her tray and wiped the food from her uniform with unhurried movements. "I'm asking you nicely," she said, her voice still quiet. "Please step aside and let me get another tray." The audacity of it, this small woman asking her tormentor to move aside politely, sent another wave of laughter through the cafeteria. Roxy's face twisted with rage. The disrespect was intolerable. She reached out to shove Elena hard in the chest, and suddenly found herself on her knees, gasping in pain, her wrist bent at an angle that threatened to snap bone. The laughter died instantly. Elena had moved so fast that most inmates didn't even see what happened. One moment Roxy was reaching for her. The next she was on the ground with Elena's hand controlling her wrist in a joint lock that made any movement excruciating. "I asked you nicely," Elena repeated, her voice still calm. "Now I'm telling you, don't touch me again." She released Roxy's wrist and stepped back. The entire cafeteria was frozen. Guards at the far end of the room were starting to move, but they were too far away to have prevented what just happened. Roxy struggled to her feet, her face red with embarrassment and rage. Her crew stood frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Their invincible leader had been brought to her knees by a woman who looked like she should be teaching yoga classes. "You're dead," Roxy hissed, cradling her wrist. "You hear me? Dead." Elena walked calmly to the serving line to get a replacement tray. The inmates parted before her like water. Word of what happened in the cafeteria spread through Greenfield like wildfire. By lunchtime, every inmate in the facility knew that the new Latina had humiliated Roxanne Blake in front of everyone. Some saw it as an opportunity. If Roxy could be challenged, maybe her grip on cell block D wasn't as strong as everyone thought. Others saw it as a death sentence. There was no way Roxy would let this stand. Elena spent the rest of the day in the library, reading and staying out of sight. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, was a quiet woman who had worked at Greenfield for over 15 years. She had seen violence that would haunt her dreams, but she had also seen moments of genuine transformation. Something about the new inmate intrigued her. "You're different from most of the women in here," Mrs. Chen observed as Elena returned a book on philosophy. "We're all different," Elena replied. "Prison just strips away the pretenses that hide those differences." "You speak like an educated woman. What brought you to this place?" Elena selected another book from the shelf. "Poor Choices and Desperate Circumstances. The road to this place is paved with both." What Mrs. Chen didn't know was that Elena had embezzled funds from her martial arts studios to pay for her sister's medical treatments. Cancer had ravaged her younger sister's body, and the insurance companies had denied every claim. Elena had made a choice: save her sister or follow the law. She chose her sister. The courts chose prison. That evening, Ashley whispered across the darkness of their cell. "Is it true what everyone's saying? What you did to Roxy? They're saying you're some kind of martial arts master or something." Elena was quiet for a long moment, lost in memories of a different life. Training sessions that lasted until dawn. Students who looked up to her with respect and admiration. A world where her skills were used to protect and teach, not to survive. "I was a teacher," she said finally. "For a very long time." "What did you teach?" "Discipline. Control. How to find strength in stillness." Ashley was quiet for a while, processing this information. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely audible. "Roxy's going to come for you. Her and her whole crew. They can't let what happened today stand." Elena stared up at the ceiling where a thin shaft of light from the corridor painted geometric patterns on the concrete. "I know," she said simply. "Aren't you scared?" Elena considered the question carefully. Fear was a natural response to danger, but it was also a choice. You could let it paralyze you, or you could acknowledge it and move forward anyway. "Fear is just information," she said. "It tells you to be prepared, but it doesn't have to control your actions." The attack came the next morning, in the showers. Elena had expected it. Roxy couldn't let the cafeteria incident go unpunished. The only question was when and how. The shower room was nearly empty when Elena arrived. She preferred the early morning, before most inmates woke up. The hot water was a luxury in this place, and she let it run over her shoulders as she centered herself for what was coming. She heard them before she saw them. Multiple sets of footsteps, moving with purpose. Elena didn't turn around, but her reflection in the metal mirror showed her everything she needed to know. 3 women entered, members of Roxy's crew. They spread out in a semicircle, blocking the only exit. Their body language spoke of violence barely contained. The leader was a wiry woman with gold teeth called Snake. She grinned as she approached. "Morning, Chiku. Roxy wants to have a word with you." Elena continued rinsing off, her movements unhurried. "I figured she might." "Smart girl. What happened yesterday? That was embarrassing for all of us. Made us look weak in front of the whole block. Can't have that." "I understand your position," Elena said calmly. "But I won't be going anywhere with you." Snake's grin widened. "Wasn't really asking." The first woman lunged forward, reaching for Elena's arm. What happened next was so fast that Snake barely registered it. Elena pivoted, her hand shooting out in a swift strike that hit the attacker's wrist with surgical precision. The woman cried out and stumbled backward, clutching her arm as feeling left her fingers. The second attacker rushed in from the side, swinging wildly. Elena ducked under the punch and drove her elbow upward into the woman's solar plexus. The breath exploded from her lungs as she doubled over, gasping. Snake backed toward the door, her eyes wide with disbelief. Two of Rox's best enforcers had been neutralized in less than 10 seconds. "This ain't over," Snake snarled as she helped her injured companions to their feet. "Rox's got plans for you. Big plans." Elena straightened her shirt. "Tell Roxy she knows where to find me. I'll be in the library." The library was Elena's sanctuary in this concrete hell. Rows of worn books lined the walls, and she had found a corner table where she could sit with her back to the wall and a clear view of all entrances. The attack came in the afternoon. They weren't from Rox's usual crew. These were hired muscle from other blocks. Women brought in to handle a problem that had grown beyond Cell Block D's ability to solve. The leader was a mountain of a woman with arms like tree trunks and scars that spoke of countless violent encounters. They called her Crusher, and her reputation preceded her through every cell block in the prison. "You must be the Latina causing all the trouble," Crusher said, her voice like gravel. "Roxy Blake sends her regards." Elena closed her book carefully. "I suppose talking this through isn't an option." Crusher cracked her massive knuckles. "Talking time's over, Chiku. You embarrassed the wrong woman." The library erupted into chaos as other inmates scrambled for exits. Mrs. Chen retreated behind her desk, reaching for the emergency button that would summon guards. But Elena knew that help wouldn't arrive in time. It never did when you needed it most. Crusher moved with surprising speed for her size, her massive fist cutting through the air toward Elena's head. But Elena wasn't there when the punch arrived. She had slipped to the side, her movement so smooth it seemed like she had simply faded from existence. Elena's counterattack was swift and precise. Her palm struck Crusher's kidney with enough force to drop a normal person, but the giant barely grunted. Years of prison violence had hardened her beyond normal limits. Crusher spun with a back fist that would have shattered Elena's skull, but Elena ducked and rolled away. The massive fist splintered the wooden bookshelf where her head had been. The second attacker joined the fray, swinging a makeshift weapon, a toothbrush handle with a razor blade. Elena caught her wrist mid-swing, twisted sharply, and heard the satisfying crack of breaking bone. But Crusher was relentless. She grabbed Elena in a bear hug, lifting the smaller woman off her feet and squeezing with enough force to crack ribs. Elena's vision began to blur as the air was crushed from her lungs. In that moment of crisis, Elena's training took over completely. She drove her thumbs into pressure points along Crusher's arms, disrupting the nerve signals that controlled grip strength. The giant's hold loosened just enough for Elena to break free. Elena dropped to the floor and swept Crusher's legs, sending the massive woman crashing into a table that collapsed under her weight. Before Crusher could recover, Elena was on her, positioning her hand at the giant's throat in a hold that could render her unconscious in seconds. "Yield," Elena said quietly, applying just enough pressure to make her point clear. Crusher's eyes went wide with panic as she felt her air supply being cut off. She had never been in a position where her size and strength meant nothing. "I yield," she gasped. Elena immediately released the hold. The library fell silent except for the groaning of injured women and the sound of approaching boots as guards finally arrived. "What happened here?" demanded Sergeant Williams, the head of security. Elena straightened her torn uniform and looked around at the destruction. The injured inmates, the scattered books, the broken furniture. "Disagreement over a book," Elena replied calmly. "It got out of hand." Williams looked at the carnage and the small Latina woman standing calmly in the center of it all. Her experience told her there was more to this story, but prison politics were complicated. "Medical attention for the injured," Williams ordered. "And you, solitary confinement. 48 hours. Elena nodded in acceptance. It was a small price to pay for sending a message that would echo through every cell block in the prison. As guards escorted her away, Elena caught sight of Roxanne Blake watching from the corridor. The gang leader's face was a mask of rage and frustration. Her hired muscle had failed spectacularly, and now every inmate in Greenfield knew that Rox's reach had limits. Solitary confinement was an 8 by 10-foot box of concrete and steel. Most inmates emerged from solitary broken, their minds shattered by the crushing loneliness. Elena used the time to meditate, to center herself for what she knew would come next. When Elena emerged from solitary 2 days later, the entire prison had shifted. Inmates stopped talking when she passed. Even the guards treated her with cautious respect that hadn't been there before. Ashley was waiting in their cell, relief flooding her face. Everyone's been talking about what you did to Crusher. Is it true she begged you to stop? Elena settled onto her bunk. Everyone begs when they can't breathe. But something had changed. Roxy never made another move against her. The Queen had learned that some battles aren't worth fighting, especially against someone who had spent decades mastering the art of controlled violence. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. Younger inmates began approaching Elena, asking questions. Not about fighting, but about discipline. Control. How to find peace in a place designed to break them. Elena started teaching meditation classes in the library. Small groups at first, then larger ones. Mrs. Chen provided the space, recognizing that something valuable was happening. The classes weren't about martial arts. Elena never demonstrated techniques or encouraged violence. Instead, she taught breathing exercises, meditation, ways to find stillness in chaos. Even some of Roxy's former crew members attended, drawn by the promise of something different from the endless cycle of violence and retribution. Roxy herself watched from a distance, her empire slowly crumbling as inmates discovered they didn't need protection from someone who ruled through fear. They could find strength within themselves. Elena served the remainder of her sentence in relative peace. She taught her classes, read her books, and counted down the days until her release. On her release day, 7 years after those steel doors first closed behind her, Elena walked out of Greenfield Women's Correctional Facility the same way she had walked in, with quiet dignity and unshakable calm. Her sister was waiting outside, healthy and cancer-free. The medical treatments that had cost Elena 7 years of freedom had worked. As the prison doors closed behind her for the last time, Elena thought about the lesson she'd left behind. A lesson that echoed through every cell block. Never judge someone by their appearance. Because you never know what kind of power lies beneath a gentle exterior. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who looks the least threatening. And sometimes the greatest warriors are the ones who choose peace until the moment they have no other choice. If this story changed how you think about strength and power, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. What do you think? Is real strength about fighting, or about choosing when not to fight? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to smash that like button to help us bring these powerful stories to more people. Thanks for watching Behind Bar Tales, where every story has a lesson worth learning.